This is a question that I've been wanting to ask religious scholars and atheist scholars for a while, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't think we'd be having this conversation if, at least not with the same intensity, if it weren't for what happened on September 11th, 2001. So on that day when 19 men took 3 different airplanes and each one prayed to God that they would succeed, you had passengers on those 3 airplanes terrified, praying to God for those men to fail. So I guess my question to David is, if prayer works, how did it work that day? And my question to you, Christopher, is, if those people didn't have prayer in those last moments, what would you suggest they do? Either one.
Okay, so I think that for both of them, if you believe that prayer, I mean, look, I understand in a moment of desperation that people pray that there will be a sort of magical intervention in the world. But I don't believe that that's how prayer works, and I don't believe that most people who pray day to day in healthy faith believe that this is a sort of slot machine that where you have good odds that if you pull the lever enough times you'll get the result. For myself and for people I know who've gone through difficult times and sickness, I know that what you pray for is intimacy and closeness, and that you not be alone. I don't believe that because I was sick and prayed that God said, okay, well, Wolpe prayed, so I'm going to save him. In fact, I believe what Leona Medina said already in the 17th century, and he's following a long tradition of commentary. I mean, even in the Talmud, it says that there's no reward for mitzvot in this world, which the rabbis understood. What Leona Medina says is, if you saw a man who was pulling his boat towards the shore and you were mistaken about sort of mechanics and motion, you might think that he was pulling the shore towards his boat. And the same thing's true of prayer. A lot of people pray and when they think that they're changing God. But actually, if they pray well, what they're doing is changing themselves. And if you ask me, just as in every other human activity, there's good prayer and there's bad prayer. The prayer that says, God, help me kill these people, is distancing you from God. The prayer that at the last moment people say because they know that they're facing their death and they don't want to face it alone is the prayer that draws you close from God. And I have no doubt that those prayers were, in this sense, answered.
There was a Sufi imam in 13th century Basra, in today's Iraq and Mesopotamia, whose prayer was, oh God, if I believe in you for my fear of hell, send me to hell. If I believe in you because of my wish for heaven, deny me heaven. So he was asking to be given responsibility. I would say that wasn't a prayer or even a mantra. I'd say that was a decent reflection. You're, of course, quite right that on the 11th of September 2001, we were forced yet again, as we are all the time, to confront the fact that faith by itself doesn't deserve respect, as we keep saying it does. That faith on its own is another form of fanaticism or substitution of belief for reason, and that's a sign of what a poorly evolved primate, mammalian species we are. The rabbi earlier appeared to pour contempt on the idea that we should think of ourselves as animals. Well, again, evidence counts, ladies and gentlemen. We are half a chromosome away from being chimpanzees, and don't you think it shows? Yes, of course we are animals. We're I think, a qualitatively as well as quantitatively better primate, but primates is what we are, and we know it. We even have the DNA to absolutely establish it. Nothing to be proud of or ashamed of, but a fact not to be denied. Now, we're lucky that there were people on one of those planes who didn't pray at all. They got out of their seats and they said, we're not going to let this plane fly into the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. We're willing to give our lives to prevent people who are willing to commit suicide. In order to prevent that happening. No time to pray, time to act. Very important. That's what we should be grateful for. If they'd all fallen to their knees and invoked the deity, the plane would have hit the Capitol on an election day, by the way, primary day in New York, and I think during a joint session of both houses of Congress. And in case you don't know this, I live in Washington, D.C. That dome isn't made of marble, it's made of wrought iron. It would have melted on top of our legislators. We'd never have got over it. Now, Douglas Wilson, my Christian antagonist, the other day said to me, see what a nihilist Hichens is. He thinks that over Auschwitz there was only sky. He doesn't think that Hitler would be judged. Now again, I didn't say I didn't wish he'd be judged. I said I don't think he was going to be. And he certainly didn't act, even though he had the blessings of Christianity and the Pope behind him. And no one in his party was ever even threatened with excommunication for taking part in the final solution. He didn't act as if he feared such a judgment. And the best book, in my view, on the final solution, the Endlosen, the Shoah, is Arno Mayer's book, Why Did the Heavens Not Darken? Well, I think this is a stupid question, because unfortunately there was only sky over Auschwitz. Heaven was indifferent in that moment. You didn't have to tremble at the thought that God was just. You had to tremble at the thought there wasn't a just God. A much worse tremble, if you see what I mean. But it's not all bad news, because it does mean that those who crash planes full of living people into buildings full of living people, shouting that God is great and believing it's going to get them to paradise, aren't going to get there.
About that,
one is only
about
sorry.
That we agree.
One is only sorry, and very sorry in my case, that there's no moment, at the moment of their extinction, there's no moment when they think, damn, it isn't. But wishful thinking can't help that either. So my settled consideration, verdict on this is, they want to die, and I'm here to help them do so. And so should you be, and everyone in this room should be ashamed until they've done something to kill at least one jihadist or bring about the physical and moral and political and military defeat and humiliation of these people. And the God in which they believe. And the non-existent deity in which they dare to take permission to try and kill us all.
Christopher, have you ever prayed?
Once for a hard-on. And I don't know whether it worked or not.
As a rabbi, I may be wrong, but I thought you said that I was obsessed with Freud.
I'm not going to tell you what happened, and I don't know whether it was the prayer in either case.
Does prayer work?
But you had to ask, so I have to tell.